Sutras. In Indian culture, political and social ethics are focused around the three goals of dharma, which means justice, duty, or virtue, artha, which means success or prosperity or wealth, and kama, which means pleasure. The fourth goal of moksha, which means liberation, is considered the highest goal sought through spiritual and religious endeavor. Ways of attaining this spiritual release from the cycle of rebirth have been discussed in the lectures on the Upanishads, Jainism, and Buddhism, and will also be discussed in the next lecture on Hinduism. The era of the sutras in Hindu culture slightly preceded the development of Jainism and Buddhism in the 6th century BC, and lasted until the law codes began to become more formalized in the laws of Manu starting around the 2nd century BC. Each school of Brahmins had their own collection of duties, with the Shrauta Sutras on the Vedic sacrifices, the Griya Sutras on domestic ceremonies, and the Dharma Sutras on personal and social conduct. All of these follow the sacred traditions of the Aryan Vedas and distinguish the various duties, obligations, and privileges of the four castes. The Griya Sutras delineate detailed rules for the householder in regard to marriage and household customs, manners, and rituals. The Dharma Sutras cover broader areas of social customs and offer special rules for almost every aspect of life. The four castes of the Brahmins, which are the priests, Kshatriyas, who are the rulers, the Vaishyas, who are the farmers and merchants, and the Sudras, the workers, are a strict hierarchy, with each preceding caste superior by birth to the one following. The twice-born top three are ordained through initiation to study the Vedas and kindle the sacred fire, but the Sudras are only ordained to serve the other three superior castes. Brahmins are initiated in the 8th year after conception in the spring, Kshatriyas in the 11th year in the summer, and Vaishyas in the 12th in the autumn. The one initiating them becomes their teacher and must be served loyally according to strict rules. Initiates were not supposed to associate with those families that were not initiated, who were called slayers of Brahman. Respect was to be shown to those in a superior caste and to those of the same caste venerable for their learning and virtue. Belief in the caste system is based on the idea of karma, that those who act well in this life will be born in better circumstances or a higher caste next time, and those who do not fulfill their duties will be born in a lower caste and worse circumstances. Nevertheless, this arbitrary system based on birth does tend to violate the principles of justice and equal opportunity for all. The student phase of life was quite strict and celibate. These youths were not allowed to look at dancing, attend festivals or gambling halls, gossip, be indiscreet, talk with women unnecessarily, nor find any pleasure where one's teacher could be found. Students were to restrain their organs, be forgiving, modest, self-possessed, energetic, and free of anger and envy. The teacher was to love the youth as his own son and give him full attention in teaching the sacred knowledge without hiding anything in the law. Teachers were not allowed to use their students for their own purposes to the detriment of their studies, except in times of distress. The syllable Om was chanted prior to studying the Vedas, and 12 years were considered necessary for the study of each of the 4 Vedas, although not everyone studied all 4, as family traditions tended to focus on one of the Vedas. Meditation was practiced to gain wisdom and recognize the soul, Atman, in all creatures, as well as the eternal being within oneself. The eradication of faults such as anger, exultation, grumbling, covetousness, perplexity, doing injury, hypocrisy, lying, gluttony, calumny, envy, lust, secret hatred, and neglecting to control the senses or mind was accomplished by means of yoga. Detailed rules of penance are described for numerous offenses. When adequate knowledge of the Veda has been gained by the student, he goes through a bathing ceremony as henceforth known as a snataka. Rules for the snataka are detailed, as are the duties of the householder after marriage. Rules of inheritance are defined, and funeral ceremonies are described. Beyond student and householder are two more stages of life available to spiritual seekers who leave their home to become a chaste hermit in the forest, possibly to be followed by the final stage of renouncing everything as an ascetic or sannyasin who must live without a fire, without a house, without pleasures, without protection, remaining silent and uttering speech only on the occasion of the daily recitation of the Veda, begging so much food only in the village as will sustain his life. He shall wander about, neither caring for this world nor for heaven. Such a person is clearly seeking spiritual liberation, moksha. The beginnings of criminal and civil law are also outlined in the Dharma Sutras. But punishments are differentiated according to the perpetrator's caste and also the victims. Neither capital nor corporal punishment were to be inflicted on Brahmins. A Brahmin might be exiled, but he was allowed to take his things. The Apastamba Sutra concludes with the idea that duties not taught in the text must be learned from women and men of all castes. Laws of Manu. Based on earlier Dharma Sutras, the most influential and first great law code of the Hindus, the Laws of Manu, was written between the 2nd century BC and the 2nd century CE. The sage Manu begins by describing the creation from the divine self-existent reality which can be perceived by the internal organ. The best of the created beings are those animated ones who subsist by their intelligence. And of those, humans, the best are the Brahmins who learn the Vedas and know God, Brahman. Manu declares the sacred law as it pertains to the 4 castes, varna, meaning color. Though action from a desire for rewards is not laudable, there is no exception in this world. And the study of the Veda is based on the idea of action, or karma. That acts, sacrifices, and the keeping of vows and laws are kept on the belief that they will bear fruit. Those who obey the revealed laws and the sacred tradition gain fame in life and after death unsurpassable bliss. The sacred law comes from 4 sources: the Vedas, the sacred tradition, the customs of the virtuous, and one's own conscience. The Vedas represent the revealed truth, or Shruti, and on them are based the sutras, and these laws which define the sacred tradition are called Smriti. Thus, study of the Vedas is still primary for the 3 castes who are initiated. The best way to restrain oneself from sensual pleasures is by constant pursuit of knowledge. The student is to abstain from honey, meat, perfumes, garlands, spices, women, any acid, and from doing injury to living creatures. Students especially must watch out for women, because it is their nature to seduce men, and they can lead astray even a learned man, causing him to become a slave of desire and anger. Originally, the castes and laws may not have been as rigid as they later became. With faith, says the Laws of Manu, one may receive pure learning even from a person of a lower caste, the highest law from the lowest, and an excellent wife may come from a base family. Many of the rules for students and snatakas follow those in the Dharma Sutras. There is the deeper belief that injustice practiced in this world may not bear fruit at once, but eventually it will cut off one's roots, and it may even fall on one's sons or grandsons, though one may prosper for a while through injustice. The following advice is given to the twice-born. Let him always delight in truthfulness, the sacred law, conduct worthy of an Aryan, and purity. Let him chastise his pupils according to the sacred law. Let him keep his speech, his arms, and his belly under control. Let him avoid wealth and desires if they are opposed to the sacred law, and even lawful acts which may cause pain in the future or are offensive to people. Let him not be uselessly active with his hands and feet, or with his eyes, nor crooked, nor talk idly, nor injure others by deeds, or even think of it. Unquote. Though one may be entitled to accept presents, one should not get attached to accepting them, lest the divine light in one be extinguished. The Brahmin who accepts gifts without performing austerities or studying the Veda sinks like a boat made of stone. Everyone is born single and dies the same way. Single one enjoys virtue or sin, for in the next world neither father, mother, wife, nor son stay to be one's companions. Only spiritual merit alone remains. The persevering, gentle, and patient shun the company of the cruel, and doing no injury gains by controlling one's organs and by liberality heavenly bliss. To lie to the virtuous is the most sinful thing, as it steals away one's own self. What is most salutary for the soul is to meditate constantly in solitude in order to attain supreme bliss. Non-injury, ahimsa, is essential to this ethic. Those who injure beings in giving oneself pleasure never find happiness in life or death. But those who do not cause suffering to living creatures and desire the good of all obtain endless bliss. Whoever does not injure any attains without effort what one thinks of, what one understands, and what one fixes one's mind on. Meat can never be obtained without injury to living creatures, and injury to sentient beings is detrimental to heavenly bliss. Let one therefore shun meat. Having well considered the origin of flesh and the fettering and the slaying of corporeal beings, let one entirely abstain from eating flesh. In spite of these thoughts, animals were still sacrificed. Though where women are honored, the gods are pleased, females are to be subordinate to men throughout their lives, the child to her father, the woman to her husband, and after his death to her sons. They apparently believed that the child was completely determined by the seed of the man, and that the womb was only like the soil of the field. Yet the law also held that what was sown in someone else's field belonged to the field, or the owner of the field. A wife may accompany her husband in the third stage of life as a hermit in the forest. There one meditates and studies the Upanishads in order to attain complete union with the soul. After studying the Vedas, having sons, and offering sacrifices, in the fourth stage one may direct one's mind to the final liberation. The ascetic gives up all worldly things, bearing patiently hard words, anger, and curses, without returning anger, drinking purified water, and uttering only speech purified by the truth. Abstaining from all sensual enjoyments, one sits alone, delighting in the soul. In deep meditation, indifferent to all objects, one may recognize the Supreme Soul that is present in all organisms. The tenfold law of all four stages of life is contentment, forgiveness, self-control, non-stealing, purification, control of the organs, wisdom, knowledge, truthfulness, and abstention from anger. The kshatriya, whose model is the king, has the sacred duty to protect everyone and must also act as judge, prescribing proper punishment for those who commit wrongs. If the king did not punish those who needed it, the stronger would roast the weaker. The king was to be just to his own subjects, chastise enemies, be honest with friends, and lenient toward Brahmins. They had it rigged. The main vices the king must watch out for come from the love of pleasure and wrath. Vice is to be feared more than death, because the vicious sink down while the one who dies free from vice ascends to heaven. Here we also find, for perhaps the first time, the atrocious belief that a warrior who fights hard in battle goes to heaven if killed. In spite of the concept of non-injury, warfare was still socially acceptable. However, the wise king arranges everything so that no ally or neutral or foe may injure him, and this is considered the sum of political wisdom. Foes may be conquered by conciliation, by gifts, and by creating dissension, but never by fighting. Civil and ceremonial laws fall into the following 18 categories: non-payment of debts, deposit and pledge, sale without ownership, concerns among partners, resumption of gifts, non-payment of wages, non-performance of agreements, rescission of sale and purchase, disputes between owner and servants, boundary disputes, assault, defamation, theft, robbery and violence, adultery, duties of husband and wife, and inheritance partition and gambling. Justice violated destroys, but preserved justice preserves. Justice is the only friend one has after death, for everything else is lost. Yet the soul is the witness of the soul and the refuge of the soul. The wicked may think no one sees them, but the gods see them distinctly. Those who commit violence are considered the worst offenders, and the king who pardons the perpetrators of violence incurs hatred and quickly perishes. The laws of Manu are summarized as non-injury, truthfulness, non-stealing, purity, and control of the organs. The main duty of the Brahmin is to teach, the Kshatriya to protect, the Vaishya to trade, and the Sudra to serve. Penances are detailed but can be summarized as by confession, repentance, austerity, and by reciting the Veda or by liberality. In proportion as one confesses and loathes the wrong, one is freed from guilt, and one is purified by stopping the sin and thinking, I will do so no more. Austerities are to be repeated until one's conscience is satisfied. Realizing what comes after death, one will always be good in thought, speech, and action. Mental faults are coveting the property of others, thinking what is undesirable, and adhering to false doctrines. Wrong speech comes from untruth, detracting from the merits of others, abuse, and talking idly. Bad actions are taking what has not been given, injuring, and intercourse with another's wife. The doctrine of reincarnation helps people to realize that the consequences of their actions may occur in another life. All actions are good, sattva, passionate, rajas, or dark, tamas. Goodness comes from knowledge, darkness from ignorance, and passion from love and hate. Goodness results in bliss, calm, and pure light. Passion ever draws one toward pleasure and pain, and darkness leads to delusion, cowardice, and cruelty. The good in their next life are more divine, the passionate are human, and the dark more animalistic. Ultimately, knowledge of the soul is the first science, because by self-knowledge, immortality is attained. Arthashastra. The classic work on the goal of material success is the Arthashastra by Kautilya, who is identified with Chanakya, the advisor of Chandragupta, first king of the Mauryan dynasty. This treatise is a collection of political, legal, and economic advice from earlier sources put together and commented on by Kautilya. Unfortunately, it is another step down ethically from the Dharma Sutras and traditional law codes to a worldly strategy of how to enhance one's own kingdom, often at the expense of others. The complete text of this work was discovered in 1905 and has been translated into English. In the third chapter, Kautilya repeats the traditional views of the Vedas, the caste system, the 4 stages of life, and lists the duties common to all as harmlessness, truthfulness, purity, freedom from spite, abstinence from cruelty, and forgiveness. However, he then goes on to analyze government as the art of punishment based on discipline. Kautilya saw his work as the science of politics, which deals with the means of acquiring and maintaining the earth. The study of any science depends on the mental faculties of obedience, hearing, perception, memory, discrimination, inference, and deliberation. Princes were to be celibate until they came of age at 16, at which time they were expected to marry. Girls came of age at 12. Restraining the senses depends upon abandoning lust, anger, greed, vanity, haughtiness, and overjoy. Kautilya begins to reveal his value system when he places wealth above charity and desire, because these two depend on wealth. He seems to forget truthfulness and harmlessness when he recommends the institution of spies using fraud and duplicity. Although Kautilya declares that the prince should be taught only justice, dharma, and wealth, artha, and that he should do what pleases his subjects, to his rational mind this may mean warfare and treachery against their enemies. After describing the villages, lands, and forts, Kautilya goes on to delineate the duties of the chamberlain, the collector general, account keepers, and the superintendents of gold, storehouse, commerce, forest, produce, armory, weights and measures, tolls, weaving, agriculture, liquor, slaughterhouse, prostitutes, ships, cows, horses, elephants, chariots, infantry, passports, pasture, land, and the city. Brahmins, ascetics, children, the aged, the afflicted, royal messengers, and pregnant women are to be given free passes to cross rivers. Diplomatic negotiation is to be carried out by praising the other's qualities, discussing mutual benefits, future prospects, and the identity of interests. Law is based on justice, evidence, history, and the edicts of kings. But for Kautilya, the royal will is the most important, though the justice of the sacred law takes precedent over history when they disagree. Marriage cannot be dissolved by the husband or wife against the will of the other, but if there is mutual enmity, divorce may be obtained. Neighborhood elders may be consulted to settle disputes about fields. Kautilya recommends cooperation with public projects and suggests the order of any person attempting to do a work beneficial to all shall be obeyed, and those disobeying may be punished. The native Mlechas, who are considered barbarians, may sell their offspring into slavery, but Aryans may not. A person who has voluntarily enslaved oneself and runs away is to be enslaved for life, and one who has been mortgaged into slavery is enslaved for life for running away twice. Violation of female servants, cooks, and nurses earns them their liberty at once. If a master fathers a child with a slave, both the child and the mother are to be recognized as free. Slaves can buy back their freedom for their sale price, and Aryans captured in war can also purchase their freedom. Kautilya describes the various punishments for offenses, which can include torture, mutilation, and capital punishment, though fines are most often applied. Verbal abuse is punished with a fine, whether it is true or false. And the penalties for assault are halved if the offense is due to carelessness, intoxication, or loss of sense. Fines generally vary according to the rank of the person and the seriousness of the offense. No man shall have sexual intercourse with any woman against her will. Mercy is to be shown to pilgrims, ascetics doing penance, those suffering disease, hunger, thirst, or fatigue, rustic villagers, those suffering punishment, and paupers. People are to be honored for their learning, intelligence, courage, high birth, and magnificent works. Revenues are to be collected like fruits, only when they are ripe. To try to collect revenue when unripe may injure the source and cause immense trouble. In addition to the usual services, artists and musicians, the court also supports a foreteller of the future, a reader of omens, an astrologer, a reader of the Puranas, a storyteller, and a bard. Advisors are to tell the king what is good and pleasing, but not what is bad. Though, when the king is ready to listen, he may be told secretly what is unpleasant but good. For Kautilya, the elements of sovereignty are the king, the minister, the country, the fort, the treasury, the army and its ally, and the enemy. A good king is described as born of a high family, godly, virtuous, courageous, truthful, grateful, ambitious, enthusiastic, not addicted to procrastination, powerful and controlling neighbor kings, resolute, with a good assembly, having a taste for discipline, with a sharp intellect and memory, trained in various arts, dignified, with foresight, discerning the need for war, not haughty, free of passions and bad habits, and observing traditional customs. The acquisition of wealth and its security is dependent on peace and industry. Kautilya defines three kinds of strength as the ability to deliberate being intellectual strength, a prosperous treasury being strength of sovereignty, and martial power being physical strength. The traditional 6 forms of state policy are peace, war, neutrality, marching or preparing for war, alliance, and the double policy of making peace with one and waging war against another. Although Kautilya is not reluctant to use warfare, at least he does recognize that if the situation is equal, peace is preferable, because war involves loss of power and wealth, traveling, and sin. Kautilya uses rational calculations of self-interest in deciding whether to march against enemies. In my opinion, Kautilya is to be severely criticized for recommending the use of war as a political instrument in disregard of human welfare. His position can clearly be seen as a degeneration from his own teacher's more humane views in the following passage, which I quote, "My teacher says that in an open war, both sides suffer by sustaining a heavy loss of men and money, and that even the king who wins a victory will appear as defeated in consequence of the loss of men and money. No, says Kautilya, even a considerable loss of men and money, the destruction of an enemy is desirable." Kautilya believes that peace dependent on honesty or an oath is more immutable in this world and the next than that based on security or a hostage, which is for this world only. Kautilya thought that he and those who know the interdependence of the 6 forms of policy can play at pleasure with kings bound round with chains skillfully devised by himself. But I would submit that those chains based on human violence and suffering bind such an advisor as well and cause untold misery. Once again, Kautilya values wealth most of all, for with money one can buy treasure and an army. Kautilya, who has been compared to Machiavelli, believes that the skill of intrigue is more important than enthusiasm and power when invading another country. He coldly calculates whether the expected profit will outweigh the loss of trained men and diminution of gold and grains when deciding whether to march. By conciliation and gifts, the conqueror should use corporations or mercenaries against an enemy. But if they oppose him, he should sow seeds of dissension among them and secretly punish them. He may also use rewards for those who help him fulfill his promises to his people. Kautilya does believe the king should follow the will of the people. Whoever acts against the will of the people will also become unreliable. He should adopt the same mode of life, the same dress, language, and customs as those of the people. He should follow the people in their faith with which they celebrate their national, religious, and congregational festivals or amusements. He then goes on to recommend that spies be used to persuade the local leaders of the hurt inflicted on enemies in contrast to the good treatment they receive from their conqueror. He advises the extensive use of spies, even in the guise of ascetic holy men. Various descriptions of magical remedies and superstitions are based on traditional folklore. Though worldly wise, the ethics of Kautilya leaves much to be desired. Kama Sutra. The 4th aim of life to be discussed is kama, which means pleasure. The main aspect of pleasure discussed in the Kama Sutra is sexual love. Like the Arthashastra, these ideas on erotic techniques and methods were passed down through an oral tradition from the ancients. The legendary founder is Nandi, Shiva's companion. And about the 8th century BC, Shvetaketu, known to us from the Brihadaranyaka and Chandogya Upanishads, is said to have summarized them. This extensive work was passed down through the family of Babru, and between the 3rd and 1st centuries BC, several authors wrote shorter works on different aspects of eroticism, including Sarvananabha on erotic approaches, Gota Kamuka on the art of seducing girls, Gonardiya on the wife's duties and rights, Gonikaputra on relations with other men's women, Kuchamara on occult practices, and Dattaka, who wrote on courtesans with the help of a famous courtesan of Pataliputra. These were combined together in the oldest text we have today, the Kama Sutra, by Vatsyayana, who probably lived in the 4th century CE, or Common Era, or Christian era. In style and language, the Kama Sutra is considered quite similar to Kautilya's Arthashastra. Famous as the world's oldest and most detailed sex manual prior to our century, the Kama Sutra reveals the lifestyle and sexual morals of ancient India. Vatsyayana declares that everyone in life must pursue three aims successively. Childhood is dedicated to acquiring knowledge and is a celibate phase. The erotic predominates in adulthood, and old age is dedicated to the practice of virtue, or dharma, and spiritual liberation, moksha. Vatsyayana defines artha as material goods or wealth and says that it consists of acquiring and increasing within the limits of dharma, knowledge, land, gold, cattle, patrimony, crockery, furniture, friends, clothing, etc. Kama is the mental inclination toward the pleasures of the senses and is particularly connected to the erotic. Sexual behavior may be learned with the aid of this text and the counsel of worthy experts in the arts of pleasure. Nevertheless, Vatsyayana acknowledges that money and social success are more important than love, and virtue more important than success and fortune. With money, one can realize the other three aims of life, even in the case of prostitutes. Since sex is natural to all animals, why does it need to be studied? The preliminary acts between a man and a woman can benefit from rules of conduct. Among animals, the female is driven by instinct with little consciousness during the sexual season. Although Vatsyayana says he is a fatalist, he recognizes that success depends on human effort. The pursuit of pleasure must be coordinated with virtue and material goods. The lewd man is vain and scorned, and exaggerated emphasis on the sexual life can be self-destructive as well as ruining others. Nevertheless, sexuality is essential to human survival. The one accomplished in wealth, love, and virtue attains the greatest happiness in this world and the next. The art of loving, so pleasing to women, which allows children to be born, has been described by sages in sacred books. The erotic science should be studied along with other subjects even before adolescence and after marriage with one's mate. A girl may learn from a woman who has had sexual experience. Vatsyayana lists 64 arts which include music, dance, drawing, carpets, flower bouquets, mosaics, bed arrangement, games, charms, garlands, ornaments, dressing, perfumes, jewelry, conjuring, magic, manicure, cooking, needlework, lace making, quoting, riddles, bookbinding, storytelling, basket making, woodwork, furnishing, gems, metals, stones, arboriculture, stock breeding, teaching parrots, massage and hair care, sign language, foreign languages, decorating, observing omens, using memory, reciting, puns, poetry, cheating, disguise, manners, rules of success, and physical culture. There are also 64 erotic arts from Panchala country. Prostitutes who are beautiful, intelligent, and well-educated in these arts are honored in society and called courtesans. A man who is expert in the 64 arts is much appreciated by women. It is recommended that sexuality be satisfied within the caste, and marrying one's son to a virgin gains a good reputation, though Gandharva marriages based on mutual affection are generally considered the happiest. Exceptions to caste are made for prostitutes or widows, provided that it is only for pleasure. Young girls are also considered suitable for love affairs, and Gonika Putra recognizes a consenting married woman as a fourth category. An atrocious statement is made about a pair of lovers murdering the husband and taking his goods once the wife has fallen in love. The author also finds nothing wrong with a poor man having a love affair to become rich. However, he must not show indifference to her, or she will ruin his reputation with accusations. Yet generally, the seduction of another man's wife is considered an avoidable risk. There follows detailed chapters on how to stimulate erotic desire: embraces, petting and caressing, scratching, biting, copulation, blows, and sighs. Although a woman may be submissive or reticent, she is quick to learn the games of love. Vatsyayana declares that passion knows no rules, nor place, nor time, and variety fosters mutual attraction. Whether they continue having sexual relations or live chastely together, true love never decreases, even after 100 years. Vatsyayana believes that suffering is not the Aryan way and is not suitable for respectable people. An educated man knows how to check the violence of his impulses and knows the limits of the girl's endurance. Amorous practices vary according to the place, the country, and the moment. Oral sex is described, but not recommended by some teachers, as defiling of the face, though it is popular in some regions. Female and male homosexuality are both described. A man should respect the woman and consider her pure as a matter of principle, even though she may appear guilty by her behavior. Since moral codes and local customs differ, one should behave according to one's own inclinations. Vatsyayana asks rhetorically, practiced according to his fantasy and in secret, who can know who, when, how, and why he does it? After making love, one should be affectionate, so that a solid attachment may be established through friendly conversation. Courting and seduction are discussed in chapters on how to relax the girl and ways of obtaining the girl. Those who gain each other's trust end up becoming attached to one another out of habit. The totally trusting wife considers her husband a god and is completely devoted to him. She takes responsibility for the household. Widows may remarry and begin a new existence, and according to the ancient tradition, an unsatisfied woman may leave her husband and choose another to her taste. Vatsyayana recognizes the ethical marriage as the best and says that some men do not pursue adulterous relationships for reasons of ethics. The man who is educated in this erotic art cannot be deceived by his own wives, according to Vatsyayana. Reasonable people aware of the importance of virtue, money, and pleasure, as well as social convention, will not let themselves be led astray by passion. What is refreshing in this treatise is the openness to sexual pleasure and its naturalness without the shame and puritanical guilt so well developed in other cultures which have invaded modern India as well. The erotic is treated as an important aspect of human life and as the sacrament of marriage which unites the couple closer than anything else can, though relations outside of marriage are not forbidden. Instead of being buried by inhibitions in ancient India, people were encouraged to learn about their sexuality and develop the art of loving through education and practice. Only now, in the late 20th century, does the world seem to be acknowledging the wisdom of these techniques and this highly skilled art. So, any questions?
You talked about a sonatica?
Snataka, I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Okay. And something about ritual bathing. I was just wondering about origins of baptism. It just sounded like it. They had ritual bathing.
It's kind of an initiation, I think, actually. Yeah. Although there's a regular thing too, but there's a particular stage they get to where they go to a new stage.
But they washed them. It was a ritual washing to initiate them. So I just wondered on the connection since we have that in Christianity in the West. And just many cultures must have practiced some kind of change of life through ritual washing.
I wish I knew more about it, but maybe Moon doesn't.
The laws of Manu, I thought they would have been treated earlier. Are they from a later time?
Between the 2nd century BC and 2nd century CE, I think. But they are based on what's called the Laws of the Aryans, which are these earlier Dharma Sutras.
Are they an oral tradition, or?
Well, yeah, probably for a long time it was an oral tradition. But then the Dharma Sutras started being written down, and the Laws of Manu would just happen to be a little later, and they're getting more into the idea of a law rather than just sort of ideas, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some of their laws were good, some of them were really bad. Katila, he was quite a character. But he did have some interesting laws. If you were going to take a slave and have a son by her, then she was freed, and so was her son.
Yeah, they definitely were concerned about the sexual abuse of slaves, and so it's clearly indicated that if that takes place, that person is no longer a slave. So if you want to keep your slaves, you don't go in for that sort of thing. So that was, I think, a protection. Mm-hmm. So that seems like that was pretty good, maybe compared to some other cultures that had slavery.
On the other hand, he had quite a lot of very modern traits. He sure liked spies.
Yeah.
It sounded like he had his own FBI and CIA and others. And
yeah. And to think that they would do it, even the sacredness of ascetics, yes. Holy men, pretending to be holy men as spies. That's really going as far as you can go, I think.
When we were at the other part of the lecture where Buddha was practicing all these austerities, and now we're coming into this area, the latter part of the lecture, where Karma Sutra, exotic love, is considered natural and normal. So it's like the shift, taking place.
Well, certainly that Buddhism and Jainism are Jainism is even more ascetic than Buddhism, but they're focused on liberation and like very certain religious traditions, like in Christianity, the monastic tradition, you have this celibacy as part of this discipline. In Hinduism, you have more this broad-minded idea and this sense of stages of life, so that you have your time in your life where you're a householder and you raise a family and you are erotic and have children and experience all those joys and pleasures. But then when you get to a certain age, then you can leave those behind to go seek enlightenment. So it's more like going through different phases in the traditional Hindu culture. Although a person could always go into that stage sooner if they feel a calling to retreat,
When we look at the face of the stranger whose way